In the autumn of 1918, a sickness moved across the world faster than any army ever had. Within a single year, it reached nearly every country, every city, and almost every farmhouse on Earth. The illness people called the Spanish flu killed somewhere between 50 and 100 million human beings. And in that desperate season, with hospitals overflowing and pharmacies emptied, ordinary families turned to the one thing still growing in their own backyards. They turned to a tall, silvery-leafed plant that most people today walk straight past without a second glance. Its name is mullein, and for centuries before that pandemic and for years after it, herbalists and country physicians reached for this plant whenever a cough settled deep into someone's chest. Today, I want to show you exactly why they trusted it, what modern science has actually confirmed, and just as importantly, what it can and cannot do. Because the real story of mullein is far more interesting than the myths that get attached to it. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand this plant better than 99% of the people who have ever brewed it. Let me be honest with you, right from the start, the way I always try to be on this channel. Mullein did not cure the flu of 1918. Nothing did. There were no antibiotics yet, no antiviral drugs, no intensive care as we know it today. Most of the deaths in that pandemic came from a secondary bacterial pneumonia that set in after the virus had already weakened the lungs, and there was simply no reliable treatment for it until the antibiotic era arrived in the 1940s. So when you see a dramatic claim that one backyard plant cured pneumonia and was then banned, you are looking at a story that has been stretched far past the truth. What is true is quieter, older, and in some ways more remarkable. Mullein, known to botanists as Verbascum thapsus, has one of the longest documented histories of respiratory use of any plant in the Western world. The Puritans carried its seeds across the Atlantic for their medicine gardens in the 1630s. By the late 1630s, it had already escaped into the fields and roadsides of New England, and settlers moving west left patches of it growing beside nearly every abandoned homestead. Native American nations, including the Mohegan, the Penobscot, and the Menominee, used the dried leaves and roots for chest and lung complaints long before European settlers wrote about it. And during the great influenza pandemic, a group of licensed American physicians, known as the eclectics, used mullein alongside other plants specifically to ease the deep, painful coughs and the chest congestion that the flu left behind. So this is not folklore invented for the internet. This is a plant with a paper trail stretching back literally centuries. Before I go further, I want to tell you about something I could not fit into this video. When I researched this episode, I gathered the exact traditional preparation methods, the specific parts of the plant that were used and why, and a clear breakdown of what the modern research does and does not support. That full reference guide goes far deeper than I can here, and I have made it available through the link in the description and pinned in the comments. I will point you back to it later, but I wanted you to know it exists before we go on. Now let us talk about why this particular plant earned its reputation. If you have ever held a mullein leaf, you already know part of the answer. The leaves are soft, almost like felt, covered in fine silvery hairs, and when you brew them, they release a thick, slightly slippery substance. That substance is called mucilage, and it is the heart of the matter. Mucilage is a natural gel that coats and soothes irritated tissue, which is exactly what an inflamed, raw, coughing throat and airway are crying out for. This is why herbalists call mullein a demulcent, a word that simply means something that soothes a membrane. But mullein does something else as well. It contains compounds called saponins, and saponins help loosen and thin mucus so the body can clear it more easily. A plant that both soothes a dry, irritated airway and helps move stubborn mucus is, in plain terms, doing two useful jobs at once. That combination is precisely why traditional texts described it as helpful for hard, dry, painful coughs and for bronchial congestion. And here is where the modern picture gets genuinely interesting. If you want the precise traditional dosages and the exact way these old preparations were made, that is the kind of detail I placed in the companion guide, because getting it right matters more than getting it fast. Laboratory studies in recent decades have started to examine what is actually inside this plant. Researchers have identified the mucilage and the saponins, but also flavonoids, which are antioxidant compounds, and a substance called verbascoside. Some laboratory work has shown that extracts of mullein have antibacterial and antiviral activity in the controlled setting of a Petri dish, including activity against certain viruses. I want you to hear that carefully, because the honesty here is the whole point. Activity in a laboratory dish is not the same thing as a proven treatment in a human being. It is a reason for scientists to keep studying a plant. It is not a promise that brewing a cup of tea will defeat an infection. The large, rigorous human trials that would let a doctor say this works are, for mullein, still largely missing. What the plant has instead is a deep, consistent history of traditional use for soothing coughs and irritated airways, and a chemical makeup that makes that traditional use entirely plausible. That is the honest middle ground, and it is where the truth actually lives. This brings me to the modern medical view, because I think you deserve to hear it plainly. Doctors today will tell you that your lungs already have a remarkable built-in cleaning system. They produce mucus that traps dust and bacteria, and tiny hair-like structures sweep that mucus up and out. You do not need to detox your lungs with any plant, and any product promising to do that is overselling. What a soothing herb like mullein may reasonably offer is comfort, the easing of a dry, scratchy, irritating cough, in the same gentle way that honey or a warm tea soothes a sore throat. That is a modest and real benefit, and it does not need to be exaggerated into a miracle to be worth knowing. If you take any prescription medication, if you are pregnant, or if a cough lasts more than a couple of weeks, or comes with fever or breathlessness, the right move is always to see a qualified medical professional. A plant that soothes a cough is not a substitute for a diagnosis. Now, the reason mullein became so beloved is also practical. It grows almost anywhere. You have very likely walked past it on a roadside, in a vacant lot, or at the edge of a field without ever knowing what it was. In its first year, it forms a low rosette of those soft, woolly, silvery leaves. In its second year, it sends up a tall, flowering stalk, sometimes taller than a person, lined with small yellow flowers. Both the leaves and the flowers have been used traditionally, the leaves and flowers most often steeped into a tea. And there is one important detail that catches people off guard. When you brew mullein leaf, you must strain it carefully through a fine cloth, because those tiny hairs that make the leaf so soft can irritate the throat if they are swallowed. That single practical step is exactly the kind of thing the old herbalists knew by heart, and the kind of thing that gets lost when a plant becomes an internet trend. The exact straining method, the leaf-to-water ratio, and the regional varieties worth knowing are all laid out in the guide I mentioned, linked below, because those small details are the difference between using a plant well and using it carelessly. There is one more myth I want to put to rest before we finish. You may have heard that this plant, or others like it, were made illegal by powerful interests trying to protect the drug industry. For mullein specifically, that is simply not the case. Mullein is legal. It is widely sold today as tea, as tincture, and as capsules in shops across the world, and you can grow it in your own garden without breaking any law. What is true is that some of the other, far more powerful herbs the eclectic physicians used during the 1918 pandemic, plants like aconite and false hellebore, are genuinely toxic, and are now restricted precisely because they are dangerous, not because anyone is hiding their secret power. That restriction is a matter of safety, not conspiracy. Mullein survived into the modern day, not because it was hidden, but because it was gentle, useful, and easy to grow. So let me bring this all together for you. Mullein is a plant with a genuine centuries-deep history of soothing coughs and irritated airways. It was indeed reached for by families and physicians during the influenza pandemic of 1918, not as a cure, but as a comfort for battered lungs. Its soothing mucilage and its mucus-loosening saponins give real, plausible reasons for that long reputation. Modern laboratory studies find intriguing activity, but have not yet produced the large human trials that would let anyone honestly call it a treatment. And it remains perfectly legal, growing freely, asking nothing of you but the knowledge to use it properly. That knowledge, the real, practical, careful version of it, is what I gathered into the companion reference guide for this video. Inside it, you will find the exact traditional preparation methods, the precise way to strain and brew the leaf safely, the difference between the leaf and the flower, and when each was favored, and a clear, honest summary of what the science currently supports and what it does not. It is everything I would want a member of my own family to know before they ever brewed a single cup. You can find it through the link in the description and in the pinned comment below. If this is the kind of careful, honest look at the plants around us that you have been searching for, then you are exactly the person this channel is for. Consider subscribing, because every week we take another overlooked plant and separate what is real from what is merely repeated. Thank you for giving me your time and your attention today, and I will see you in the next one.